IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach. And today we're going to be having an episode where we talk about celebrating our rock bottom moments. We all go through rock bottom moments. This is when we feel that our life can't possibly get any worse. It's gone to the absolute pits. We're already right down there. And I call this the celebration point because there's only one way. The only way is up. And this is why we talk to our guests about it, because all of us have gone through some form of rock bottom in our life. I've gone through multiple. I know many of our guests have as well. And when we are going through a rock bottom moment, hearing stories about how people got out of it, realizing that others go through it as well is a very, very powerful thing. So we have Daniel Lobo with us, and we just did a very nice podcast. And if you missed it, please go listen to that as well after you listen to this one around mental health. And today we're going to be discussing celebrating rock bottom moments with Daniel. So Daniel, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast.
Thanks so much, Ashdin. Firstly, I love the title of the podcast. I love celebrating the rock bottoms. And I think as you were saying it, I was almost smiling to myself because I was saying you probably celebrate it in hindsight, right? When you're at the rock bottom, there's no celebration happening. So yeah. Celebration in hindsight, and love the theme of the podcast. So thanks.
Yeah, you can't even think of celebrating at that point of time. It's like the furthest thing from your mind at that point, right? So Daniel, when I say the word rock bottom, what is the thoughts that come to your mind?
Confusion, fear, and maybe loss. I think those are three big words that come to mind.
Confusion, fear, and loss.
Yeah.
Right? Is it loss or is it a feeling of being lost?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Feeling of being lost. Yeah.
Feeling of being lost.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking of loss of something. So you might just feel like you've lost something huge in your life, which is where you're at rock bottom. So that's also another way to look at it, I guess.
Yeah, and you work also a lot with people who might be at the rock bottom moments at that point of time. You've had your own rock bottom journey with us, right? So would you share your rock bottom journey with us and tell us how you got out of it?
Sure. I think I'm still getting out of it, but I've got out of that absolute rock bottom. So I think mine probably happened 6 years ago. I was in a job that, was amazing. I was traveling the world. I was cutting across time zones. I was exploring cities. I would really get under the skin of a city and meet people. It was something I loved and I think was a huge part of my identity. So I had work was my identity, right? And I think I had a massive envelope of that identity around me. What happened was I think the excessive traveling, the time zones kind of kicked off a hereditary thing in me. So my dad suffered from, dealt with kind of bipolar disorder for almost 40 years. And this might, I think, sort of, triggered something in me. And I still remember I was in Hong Kong at that time. I was meeting people and there was lots of inexplicable things happening to me, right? So I was intensely emotional for no reason whatsoever. I remember going to a bar, having a drink, and I came out and I saw a dog and that suddenly brought tears to my eyes. I remember not, when I was crossing the road, almost being hit by a bus. And there was so much energy within me that I had no idea what was going on. I would sleep 2 hours a night. I would wake up and I said, I have a million ideas running through my head. I would say, I'm going to change the world. This is how I'm going to do it. All these sorts of things. And that's when, people realized something was wrong. They flew me back to India, went to a doctor. He said, this is what has kicked in, unfortunately. By that time, I had luckily settled down. I didn't have to go to a hospital, which, touch wood, to this moment, I'm still very, very lucky to have not been in a hospital. But he said, you do have a serious mental health issue. This is what's happening. I said, that's fine, doc. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'll take care. He's like, yes, the problem is you've hit a high. And the thing of this illness is that at some point you're going to hit a low, So the next 6 months were fine. At a certain point, I remember I was in an event in Rajasthan. There were 100 people. It was the middle of the night, and I started getting massive panic attacks. Right, so I couldn't breathe, didn't know what to do. No one to help me understand what I was going through. Super confused, very fearful. For the next 3 days, whatever I did, I was not able to get out of that. And then that led to my dip, my depression. I was in intense depression for the next 6 months. And someone who was flying around the world, meeting very interesting senior people, I was not able to get out of bed and go have a shower. Yeah, that's how bad it was. And everything I was trying was just not working. So obviously, my wife didn't know what was going on. It was intense in terms of like on the family front. I would go to work midway, I would turn back and say, I don't want to meet people. And that is just not me. As a person, I love people. I love energy of people. And I just didn't want to meet anyone. I just want to go back and lie in bed. So for me, that was rock bottom.
When you were going through this whole journey, what did the doctor, the first time he diagnosed, say to you? And what was your reaction to that at that point of time?
He said, this is what you have. Your dad had it. It's showing up in you. And, this is a very typical symptom. Right? So bipolar disorder.
So you knew what bipolar disorder was at the time because of your father?
No, I knew it when my mother told me because she was in the room with the doctor. I knew my dad had it, but I never really understood what it was. I didn't know at that time they used to call it manic depression. Now it's called bipolar disorder. I knew he was depressed a lot. I just didn't know what was happening. As a kid, I didn't really understand, So after I got to know, that's when my wife did all a kind of investigations and then told me what it is. And I said, this is not me. This is not what's happening. I've just found my purpose in life. You guys don't understand what's happening. I can see it very clearly in my head. And that's what happens. It's almost a loss of touch in reality in some ways. And that happened a lot with me at that time. Luckily, again, like I said, it didn't hit so bad. I was able to get out of it in that moment that I didn't. Usually what happens is you end up in a psychiatric institution and then it's, there are lots of horror stories you hear from that, especially in the Indian mental health care institutions. But luckily that didn't happen, but I was out of it by then.
So Daniel, when you think about, what you were feeling when you were in Hong Kong and coming back, right? And you were saying that, no, I'm on a high, I'm like this, I'm like that, you don't understand. Were you feeling what you would say normal at that point of time? Did you feel that there was something, the issue? What was the situation? Like, how would you explain it to somebody who's never gone through something like that?
So I'll tell you how I experienced it, right? So because I was already on the spiritual journey, right? I talked about it on the last episode. I was exploring religion and the essence of religion and connection and energy, all of that stuff. When I was going through this phase, suddenly I felt that I was connecting to people, nature, things around me in a way that I never did before, and that is amazing for a certain point in time. I still have some of my best friends today are the people I had conversations with at that point in time, because the amount of clarity, the focus, the connection that you have is really heightened. But at a certain point, it goes overboard. And then that's where things start to get messy, So if I had to simplify it, the way that you would experience me at that time was someone who didn't sleep, was talking very on a heightened level. So not at this, normal tone. I would speak quite loudly. I would go on speaking for 15 minutes. I would speak without a break. It was scary, right? It was scary to anyone who knew me as someone who's fairly centered, chilled out, relaxed, knows how to interact with people, and I was in charge of lots of very senior relationships. So immediately, there was sort of alarm bells going off in people. But that's literally one side of the story, Ashdin. The other side, for depression, this side, the high was nice for me because it was it felt really good at that moment. And that's what I think people need to understand, right?
Yeah.
It felt good for the person, but it's scary for everyone else. But the depression side of it is the pits. It's literally, I would not wish that on anyone, because it's the worst thing on the planet to go through, that you can't get out of bed and go and have a shower. You're suddenly like a small part of you it feels like you're a small person, and that for me is probably where the rock bottom hit, at least for me. Yeah.
How did you manage to get out of that particular rock bottom?
Yeah. So I think there are three things that really worked. One is where it came a certain point where, like I talked about in the last episode, the foundational aspects, luckily for me, worked. I found a really good doctor. I was at a stage in my life where I could make sense of it. I was mature enough. I asked for help. I was okay, bringing in different perspectives. So the foundational element of medicine worked. Therapy really worked. And it took about 6 months for me to start to feel like my, normal self again, that's when I said, okay, I need to have a full potential life. I don't care if I have this. I'm just going to go for it. And I need to find what it is that really helps me, and that's the second part of the journey, which is then building the self-awareness, so I think the first leg of the journey is really how do you get that foundational aspect. And then the second one is, how do you build the self-awareness? So it's literally a journey of 6 years where I've done everything from, understanding how meditation works, understanding what works for myself, understanding my exercise regime. I started going to the gym, didn't work, so I have a personal trainer. I know that I can work out 3 times a week. I know that reading really calms me down. Talking to people really calms me down. I know that I can't have more than 1 coffee a week. I know that I cannot have more than a peg of probably 1 beer a week. So I need to my self-awareness has just have to be worked on over the last 6 years. So for me, anyone who's going through this, and it doesn't need to be bipolar, right? It's any sort of emotional, I guess, upheaval or the rock bottom moment. I think when we start to build the self-awareness, that's when we can start to get out of it. So that's one. The second is support and asking for help. So my wife was amazing. I think she's been transformational to my journey. She knew when to push me a little bit, but also be okay with saying, okay, today's not a good day. Let's just take it easy. I was okay asking for help, going and meeting people, saying that this is what I have. How do I get out of it? Like, I was just objective. I was like, I need to live a full potential life. I don't care what I need to do, right? So I would go and ask people. I would go on meditation retreats. I would go in silence. I would do all these things. And I think I just put my ego at the back, and I said, I just want to do this. Let's just get on with life, sort of attitude, right? And I think that helped. And I think the other thing that really helped was I'm a super optimistic person. I'm like, whatever happens in life, I'll be able to deal with it. But let's just go slow. So I slowed down. That really helped, and I asked for help. So that's number 2. And I think number 3, which is an ongoing journey, is this thing I talked about last time, which is self-compassion. Taking it easy, being kind to yourself, and knowing that this is a long journey. It will not. It's something that it's a life's journey for me. And I think the thing with mental health was a doorway for me to understand myself better. And I think the only way to do it is by going at it in a gentle pace and being compassionate with yourself. So self-awareness, asking for help and support, and compassion.
What you said was so critical about putting the ego to the side. You can't make that step of asking for help or self-compassion or anything if that ego is saying that how can this happen to me? What will people think of me? The me just compounds this issue till you understand that you can actually break it up.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. We have a new collaboration with Hans Magazine, and there's a show called Hans Vani that's come out from that. Treat yourself to Sarita Panti's beautiful ghazal Dar Raha Hai Muskurane Se Koi, voiced by Jashne Kalam artist Shashwata Sharma. On Postcards from Nowhere, discover how two different systems on writing were developed, one in Kashmir and one in Kerala. Kunal and Shivani Rajput talk about fitness, entrepreneurship, sibling rivalry, and share their Raksha Bandhan plans on Agla Station Adulthood. Dr. Rajiv and Manik Deshmukh share the love story behind their 52-year marriage on Marathi Kirki Tun. Chuck tells us about 5 lessons he's learned on The Habit Coach with Ashdin. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Seat, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intuit India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back. Let's jump into the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's also massively complicated, right? Because I'm able to say all of this now, 6 years later. Right? If you had asked me all of this 3 years ago, I would have been I don't know. I'm just figuring this out. So I think, like appreciating that it's a journey, and all of us are at some point in the journey in life is okay. And I think that's also just the humility of knowing that we don't know what we don't know, right? Yeah. Like I'm talking to you about all of this, but I still know that 3 days out of this week, I'm still going to sleep at 2:00 in the night and watch ridiculous stuff on social media, and that's part of life, unfortunately. But yeah, like working with ego is a huge thing. I think it's an ongoing journey. I don't think it's possible to figure it out in this lifetime, but I think we can only start.
See, Daniel, there was this one point that I wanted to bring up, which was that when you were saying that it was so difficult to get out of bed, even have a bath. Correct? What is that first step to at least getting out of that kind of a depression? And I'm saying first step because like what can you do to at least make a start?
Yeah, so Ashdin, that's a really good question and a difficult one to answer because each person is very different, right? So for me, what worked at that time was I had a good doctor, I had some meds, I came up to a certain point where I started to feel a little better, right? So foundational element, in some cases will be medicine, will be doctor, will be therapy. I would highly recommend it. If it works, amazing. On the side, on a parallel process, this work of, knowing that the mind, body, spirit element of mental health is really important. When you're down and out with depression, going for a run is impossible, right? So the thing of baby steps is really important. So one thing that I learned, again, in hindsight, is that if you're lying in bed today, can't get out of bed, if you want to run a marathon, forget about it, right? Can you at least get up and brush your teeth? Like brushing my teeth took a week, and then celebrating that, all right, today I brushed my teeth. So the next week, I'm going to go out for a walk in my house. The next week after that, I'm going to go for a walk in the building. So slowly like increasing the frequency of what you think and being okay with the fact that some days will not work, but also saying that, okay, chalo, this week I managed to do this. Awesome. I've progressed, right? So progression over perfection is always really important. So that's on a practical level. I think on a philosophical level, what I have found really useful, especially for depression, but also any emotional distress, is someone I remember telling me that, when you're going through depression or a really bad phase, it's like going through, it's like a cloudy day. There are dark clouds above and it's really, really difficult to see the sun. But at the end of the day, you have to realize that those are only clouds. At some point, they will pass, and you are the blue sky behind the clouds. And if you it's easy for me to say this now, but I always say this because it's really, really important for people who are going through that stuff to remember that they are there. There's nothing wrong with them. We believe that people are perfect in all their imperfections. But if you lose sight and if you think the cloud is you, it's just going to take much, much longer. So sometimes the cloud will take a few days, it'll take a few months, sometimes years, but the cloud will pass.
Critical. I love that part. And like you said, it's impossible to think of it at that point of time saying that those clouds are going to pass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's impossible for someone who's not experienced this to understand what you mean by that depression or that sadness.
Yeah.
Right? It is so unbelievable.
Yeah. And it can be, I've used depression as an example. You could, plug in panic attacks, you could plug in anxiety, you could plug in, whatever it is you're dealing with at the moment in these things. But I still think the principle still holds. Baby steps, asking for help, compassion, and then finally this blue sky analogy that I've used. It can be used for anything, I feel.
This aspect of coming out of a rock bottom that is a mental health rock bottom requires this, right?
Yeah.
Because very easily from a mental health rock bottom, you can get to a state of hopelessness. And hopelessness is a very, very scary place to be, right? Getting out of hopelessness is extremely hard. And that is somewhere that we should avoid as much as possible, seeing how you get there.
Yeah. And I think just to add, Ashton, if you don't mind, is the thing with mental health struggles is that we go from, at least a typical person, goes from rock bottom to rock bottom to rock bottom. And it's episodic, in some ways, at least in most cases. I'm generalizing, but this is what happens. So you might first start at 20 feet down, but then the next time might be 10 feet, right? So it's a little better, but it still feels quite bad, and that's where it gets really challenging because, someone like me who feels like I've got out of it, like 2 months from now, I might go back into a hole. And then it feels like, I've come 3 steps forward, but I've gone 2 steps behind already, or 5 steps behind. And that's what gets really, really difficult, So that's why, one thing that I want to share is that the time between when you are in those episodes, or, the fact that if you're stable now, if you're okay now, if things around you is fine, this is when you need to work on your mental health. Because if you build your resilience when you're feeling good, then the next rock bottom is not going to be so bad. That's what I firmly, firmly believe in. We start to work only on things when we hit rock bottom. Like, I really wish if I had to do things over in my life, I would work a lot more proactively on my health and my mental health, physical, mental, whatever it is. Right now, when I'm feeling good, so that the next time something bad happens, I've built that muscle, that resilience muscle, to kind of bounce back faster.
Critical, absolutely critical. When you're at your highs, that's when you do all the massive change that you want in your life, so that you know that when and if the lows come, you have the ability to deal with them far better than you did earlier on. And like you said, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and it just continues. But knowing that the action that you're taking will eventually lead somewhere is important. And you have to continuously take that action over and over and over and over and over and believe that it's going to work. And that is the important part. That's the most difficult part of this whole journey.
The most difficult part, which is why the work, continuous work combined with the self-compassion is critical. Because especially people dealing with, intense mental health issues, it's not an easy ride. Every single day there's something that comes up, if we expect it's not just on the person themselves. If we just say, you have to work on yourself, just keep doing it, it's not going to happen. That's where the community support comes. That's where family support comes. That's where this self-compassion piece comes in. There are like a million different things for it to really work. And, I have complete empathy and sympathy for anyone who goes through this stuff, because it's not an easy journey. So which is why I try to say it's, being patient about it. It's a long journey. Be compassionate, but just keep trying out stuff every single day.
Super important. Daniel, thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us. How can people get in touch with you? How can people learn more about the fantastic work that you're doing?
Sure. So we are at BecauseYOU.in. That's our website. We are a mental health social enterprise. We really work with individuals and organizations to focus on mental health. So we have different types of workshops that people can experience, as well as people who are interested in more in-depth work with in cohorts. We also have that sort of stuff available with us. So our website is the best place, BecauseYOU.in. You can leave your details. You can sign up for workshops. We'll get back to you. And our focus is really trying to build something meaningful, impactful, that's geared towards each person and their journey. Because like I said, mental health is a very individualized journey, and we're trying to do our best to be useful in this world.
Superb. Thank you so much for coming on the Habit Coach podcast.
Thanks so much, Ashdin. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome180.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcasts. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
Hi, I'm Zarina Poonawalla, host of the Empowering Series podcast on the IVM network. I happen to be a peak performance coach and leadership coach by profession, and I'm here to share with you productivity tools, life-altering techniques, and real-life hacks to help you achieve your maximum potential in everything you do, your relationships, professions, careers. So tune in every Monday to unleash your inner power. Be safe, be well, be empowered.